am the founder of Wow Women Optimizing Women. And right here on OH2, you've come at YouTube to visit tonight live with myself and my co creator, Quincy and Nichols, who is also the founder of her business, experience coaching.com. And Quincy, what's it like over in your world? What's happening in Arizona?
Well, we are still in the very thick of summer, right? So it's still extremely hot, but we are entering in that season where we're starting to see a few more thunderstorms, more monsoon. So it's cooler, but it's humid.
Mm.
But the kids are back in school on this side now, and it's moving on to the next sort of portion of the year. We're past summer, going into fall. And I'm excited for all of the upcoming opportunities that fall will bring to us.
That is so queer to me. Here we were, March, you were having 100-degree temperatures.
Hmm.
In here, Maryland, East Coast, we were still like in those cold, really cold days through like I think much of April. And now you're talking about coolness and fall. This weather is truly amazing.
And Barb, please hear me when I tell you, when I say coolness in fall, I'm still talking triple digits. It is still technically 100 degrees right now.
Okay, so just like you and I talked about a year ago about weight, me being a certain weight and thinking I'm fat is different than
Uh-huh.
somebody else being a certain weight and thinking
And
they're
then
fat.
there's,
We
yeah,
have different barometers, and
perspective. Yeah.
somebody can be here, somebody can be here, and I use that as an example a lot of times, and people misunderstand. I'm saying this person's above this person. No, no, no. It's just
Hmm.
that we're on different levels, and we
Absolutely.
think we're the same, but we're really not. Whether it's
Hmm.
the temperature,
Yep.
how you gauge hot, how cold, how I do here on the East Coast, very, very different. This is an amazing day for us, and both of us are going to get a little bit of emotional. I have a feeling today. It is Tuesday, August 11th,
Hmm.
2026. And like yesterday, and like you, and when I say yesterday, it was actually a couple of years now. It was July 26th of 2023 for me. Death and the grieving process is what we're going to talk about here on Optimize Her too. So I kind of would like to start and open about a little bit about how I've experienced death and the grieving process, if that's okay with you, Quincy.
Would love that. Yes, thank you. And I think, just a quick shout out to our listeners today. If you're not in a place for this conversation right now, please pause us, go do something else, and come back to us when this conversation feels appropriate. So take care of yourself first. But if this conversation is something that you want to hear, just sort of our true experiences with death and grief, please continue to listen with us. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good one because not everybody's at the same place, and that's part of what we're going to discuss here tonight. This isn't meant. This is all of OH2 is meant
Yeah.
to educate, elevate, and empower people. We have
Hmm.
found that our audience has changed. We know the dynamics are both male and female. We
Yes.
also know that there's people 18 years old that are listening to us. All of us will experience, if we have not, death. My biggest death year um, was when I was a little girl, and my father said to me, "Let's go see our neighbor. He died, and you won't be seeing him anymore. I want to take you with me." And my mother, she was kind of like back in the picture a little bit, but it was mainly my dad talking to me. And we went to the funeral home, the local funeral home, and my dad wanted me to touch him.
Mm.
Little girl, never talked about anyone dying. Other than our guinea pig, I don't think I ever saw anything that was dead.
That's a
And
significant jump.
I'm sorry.
I said that's a significant jump from your guinea pig to a person. Like there's
Oh
a
my god! And I didn't know what that meant when Squeaky ended up passing away.
how cute.
It was a big change in my life,
Hmm.
and I think each one of us is going to internalize it. So that was like the big year for me. I was about 6, 7 years old, and then the next big year, as far as death and dying is concerned, was then my girlfriend Sue, who died when I was 27 years old. That was back in the day when AIDS was out there, cancer was everywhere, everyone was scared of it. And to this day, I still think that she died of AIDS, but everybody just called it cancer. They covered it up. You know what I
Mm,
mean? And then the
yeah.
next big year was 2017. And here it was. My sister dies February 19th. My brother dies May 29th, and I'm in Aruba. My mother passes July 5th. Within 6 months, I lost three family members. And the year of all years, the death of all deaths, was my son, Anthony Vincent Frasca, who then passed July 26, 2023.
Mm.
And each one of those times was so different. And internalizing that was so different. How about you, Quincy? Do you have those memories and how you
Oh,
felt?
yeah. Yeah, I when I as you were sort of recounting, because at the start of the conversation, I was very sure where I wanted to start this conversation. But as you were sort of walking through your experience, it made me also sort of back up and think about what were those first experiences for me. And while it wasn't a pet, and I think for me sometimes it didn't happen until I was maybe like 13 or 14, maybe 12 at the youngest, is the first time I truly remember someone in my family passing, and that was an uncle, my mother's brother.
Mhm.
And I was younger. He was in a wheelchair. He was paraplegic, and he was in a convalescent home for my entire life. So that wasn't a direct impact, but it was in a way. From there, I think about my I've had close family friends who have passed away. Then my dad was in 2011 when I first moved to Arizona.
Mhm.
Um, my grandmother, right? So my father's mother was, I think, like maybe within a year and a half after that. So when you talk about being in Aruba, I was in Puerto Rico when I got the call about my grandmother,
Yeah.
and really had to sit with the fact of, do I leave or do I stay?
Right.
And I can tell you, in my grandmother's voice, I heard her say, "If you go home, number one, what are you going home to? I'm already gone, right? Go on your vacation." I knew she would
Mhm.
have wanted me to stay. And honestly, it was a good healing to be able to have that time and sort my feelings out. And then sort of we continue to move through that. And then I would say my most recent, and the one that has the greatest sense of impact, is the passing of my younger sister, and it'll be a year on the 27th of 2026. So this month, at the end of the month, will be her 1 year anniversary of her not being with us anymore.
And it's interesting how then, like the year after Anthony passed, he was like
Hmm.
the greatest love of my life, if you will, my son
Yeah.
dying. Uh, a year after they pass is different than 2 years. And then this time, the third year hit me about as hard as it did as I was going through the process after he passed. And death, I see death, and I've talked to people about death because death isn't openly discussed. We shy away from it. Nobody wants to
Right.
talk about it like it's dirty, like it's horrible. And then celebrating someone's life, like grandmom, here you're hearing in grandmom's voice, what are you coming back for? Well,
Right.
we did a celebration about son Anthony on my his godmother's birthday, which was August 1st of 2023, and she was kind of bummed about that. But we chose that date, August 1st, 2023, and it was clearly a celebration of him. And as people told me days later when they rode by the funeral home, they thought that person had to be a, a widely loved and cared
Hmm.
for person because there were so many cars up and down the
Yeah.
highway. And some people even told me they stopped. Some people told me they wept as they drove by.
Hmm. It's it's one of those things, because I can tell you, with when someone passes like that, right? And especially when I think in my perspective as a sibling, oftentimes we know our siblings of who they were when we were children. and living
Right.
in the home with them, right? And
Right.
as you become adults, you start branching out, living your own life. You create different friend
Sure.
groups, different interest groups, all those things. But being able to see the amount of reverence there was and still is for my sister, and just how many people had so many stories of the impact and
Yeah.
the sharing and all of the things that, were simply and are still very beautiful, excuse me, about my sister.
Sure.
It's also hard because they know her in one respect, but I also know her in another respect, right? And it's not about who knows who better, but it's just about the difference in the relationships and the way that we get to show up for people. And so it's been something that's also made me really level set and think about, how am I managing my relationships going forward?
Well,
And I think that's a fair question.
I found this ribbon as I was looking for some white paint a few minutes ago before we got on, and it says with sympathy. And I
Mhm.
put it on my chair because I thought it was so appropriate for what we were discussing
Yeah.
here this evening, Quincy. But when a loved one passes, the initial impact is like shock. I mean, I literally fell, and my girlfriend had to pick me up in the
Oh,
restroom
yeah.
because it was delivered to me uh, at a very it's in shock. Even though my
Mhm.
son said to me just a couple of weeks before, I didn't think I would make it to my 32nd birthday. My son had manic depressive type 2 and had been suffering since he was going on 21 years old, January,
Mhm.
prior to his 21st birthday. And then, you know, people were talking about pot and how pot helps. Well, pot doesn't help with depression. Pot makes it worse. It makes you suicidal, much like a lot of
Mm.
the antidepressants that people are given. And
Yeah.
he finally went back to his house, and right before my birthday, July 9th, we celebrated his birthday June 21st, and he told me he didn't think he was going to make it to his 32nd birthday. And I was so glad that he made it to my birthday, July 9th, and we got him safely back to his house. And he was going on job interviews, and he was
Mhm.
doing things. He was doing so many wonderful things. But bleh, pot became legal July 1st.
Oh, okay.
So did all these mushrooms, all this stuff. Well, we had him in Shepherd Pratt, which is a facility here on the East Coast, well renowned, much like John Hopkins, if any of you
Gotcha.
viewers have heard about that. Well, Anthony went there. He was supposed to stay in for 30 days. He didn't make it 3, and he decided, enough of this, I'm leaving. Well, then I had a talk with his psychiatrist. He had talks with his psychiatrist, and he said, no pot. For people who have manic depressive type 2, they become schizophrenic. 33%
Oh,
of
wow.
people who smoke pot regularly become schizophrenic. So Anthony had all of this stuff going on. And then it was just horrible timing when they legalized pot July 1st. He did, like I said, he didn't make it a month. He didn't make
Wow.
it a month. And, even though we were working so hard together and he seemed to be so positive, he was doing so many things. He got a new picture taken for his LinkedIn account.
Oh.
So many different things. It's still shock, and then becomes disbelief and denial and horror, just to name a few
Oh,
emotions
yeah.
that you go through.
Absolutely, because I can absolutely remember sitting in the denial phase,
Mm,
because for me, I got the call. My sister lives in a different state, so I received that phone call, that no one ever wants, and I just remember this, like, just sort of gut-wrenching yell come through my body.
oh,
Um,
yeah,
you know what I mean? And then really having to replay what I heard in my head, because it couldn't have, like, my ears and everything must be playing tricks on me. This cannot be what I heard.
yeah,
And
no,
incidentally, phones started ringing around around my home, so that I knew, okay, this is a real situation. This is not any sort of prank. This is not a bad joke. Like, this is real. And I know for me, one of the things, I can look on the other side of it now, but in that moment, I couldn't go home. I couldn't go back to California for a bit, because she was a part of my visit that I would make when I would go there.
yeah,
So, and so, not being able to really figure out, well, when I would normally spend those 2 days or so with her, what the hell do I do with that time now?
Yeah.
And
So
so then that
empty.
just became, I'm not going. and that, and it took me about 10, 11 months to get back out there.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, I went through just so many different things. It's like it would be a book, it would be a novel if I went through and talked about everything and all the emotions, and probably you would feel the same
Oh,
way.
sure.
You know, it's horrific when it's somebody that is youthful and full of vitality and so passionate about things. And it's different when you have somebody who's elderly or they had a bad accident, a disease, complications in life. Even
Right.
though that's horrific too, it's a
You're
different kind of
prepared a
things.
little
It's
bit. Yeah.
when that sibling, when that child dies, the depth in at least my experience was beyond anything I had ever. And I was in a very an abusive relationship with
Yep.
his father. Back when he was 2 years old, I got out of it, and it didn't end there. But you know, that was very difficult times, and the pain I went through at that time was deep. This was like 1,000 times deeper, the pain.
Absolutely. And I sit here understanding, processing the loss of a sibling. But when I think about it, processing the loss of a child, right? Because we just don't think about things going that way. And for me, that was one of the feelings that I knew I could not. I could help support my mother through, but
Yeah.
I could not understand what that feels like for her. And being able to, give that space, but also on the other end, it's my sibling, it's my baby sister, right?
Yeah.
And that's just a different feeling as well, because my mother is the baby of her family.
Aw.
So it's just different, you know what I mean? And I think once we actually created space a little bit for us to have our own emotions as we're processing through it, and be honest about it. And some things where you are mad and you are pissed off and maybe you don't want to talk. And
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't look pretty. You know what I mean? It's the
No,
ugly cry.
when your mind is going through all of the stuff,
Yes.
sometimes the things aren't very pretty. You got that. And there's different ways to go through grief. And, you know, you talk about, you know, the shock, you know, the horror, the anger, and so forth. And there's like 1 through 5 stages, there's 1 through 7 stages, but some of those stages are like bargaining. My
Hmm.
son had so much to live for. I've already lived so many years. I've done so much stuff. Let me go to God so that I
Hmm.
can be whole again. Let him stay here so he can work through the things much like I tried to do. And then there was the anger. Why him? Why
Yeah.
me? Why does this have to happen to me? Why did this happen to my son? The depression. I
Mm.
don't know per se that I went through any depression periods. I felt like I got at certain times very close to him, more
Hmm.
so than I could in the physical sense. The acceptance, you got to accept it. He's not going to
Yeah.
call Mama Bear. He's not going to call me, and we're not going to have 3 hour conversations on Sundays anymore. And then there's denial. He really can't be gone, is he? Is he really gone?
Right.
Is
Right.
he going to come back? You
No.
know,
And I think, and even for me, when I think about depression, right?
yeah,
And there are so many people to where if depression is a part of your family history or your history, and then you go through something like that, it can be that inciting incident that really could send you down some very scary places. And I think being
yeah,
able to have the right people around you, but even better than that is maybe the best clinical resources as well to help you through and be able to talk about it in a way that allows for you to honor your feelings, but also make sure you don't sit in any of these stages for too long. And I think for too long is uh independent to that person, right?
yeah,
Because you may sit in certain spaces longer than other, but I think there's a, like you talked about at the top of the call, sometimes, like for me in this first year, I'm like, okay, if I can just get to the first year anniversary,
Yeah.
I'll be able to know how I feel. But then you have the second and you have the third, right? And some of these things will trigger. I think about, the first time I went to go call my sister and realized, oh no, there's no one to call. So it's those moments, and then also being able to have the tools of, okay, well, what do you do when you're in that moment? How do you make sure that you're still supporting yourself in a healthy way, because they're going to happen.
There's no way to prepare. But they talk also about 7 stages, and maybe we could like briefly go over them.
Yeah.
And one is shock. We've talked about the shock,
Hmm.
that initial phone call. I got it, you got
Yes.
it. It's just,
Yeah.
there's no other way to describe it. Shock. It's just absolute shock. And then the denial. They're not really dead. They really can't be gone.
Right. Right. Or then the anger, right? Just really feeling mad at the
That's
world,
next. That's
feeling
another one.
mad that maybe, did you make yourself available, right? We start to sort of, and that, also goes into some of that bargaining, as well as what are the things that you could have done to make certain changes. And, for the most part, there's not much that any single person probably could do. And depending where your faith may align, it may be a part of a greater plan, right?
Yeah.
But I think that anger and the bargaining, those things can work hand in hand, and sometimes that can be scary.
Yeah, I felt
um
like that. Why didn't they take me? And then why
uh-huh.
him? Why me? Depression. Some people
Yeah.
get in that depression, especially I'm sure you see these commercials like Tunnel to Towers, for instance. And
Hmm.
there's this story of this veteran, his wife, who has been left behind with children, and their whole life shatters. And how deep, here they are with young children. They're a young family. They're just starting on their life, or
Right.
a small child coming into the loving arms of a parent, and then something goes awry there and they lose that small child. When there's children involved, I can see, especially with children or a spouse, how the depression can really take over.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm thankful to have my niece and my nephew, and it's it's beautiful because it has required more closeness and more connection in the relationships, right? There's more intentional effort being made to make sure that we all show up in a better way. But
Right.
it's also sometimes when I think about my niece, I can see my sister's face, right? I don't sometimes see my sister. I don't see my niece. I see my sister's face, because I remember
Right.
my sister as a
Exactly.
baby. She and I have a 10-year age difference. I'm 10 years her senior. So for me, there was a lot of playing dress up and doing all the little things that girls are sort of, trained to do. And we think that, we enjoy this thing of mommyhood. But having a little sister was something I truly enjoyed. So
Hmm.
it's a different experience being able to have these new memories with my niece,
Right.
but it's sometimes still tough because I can look at her and see my sister on her face.
Well, you're realizing and you're accepting that loss. Some
Yes.
people, they find difficulty with that. And you're kind of like, you find hope through the children.
Yes, the
When,
reconstruction.
yeah, I find that with Anthony, in that I have right next to me pictures of him when he was a child, when he was married, his silliness. He
Mhm.
was quite the intellectual. I think he was about 15 years older than what he was when he was like 18 years old. And life was difficult for him because he was so much more advanced. He was an audio learner, for instance.
Mhm.
And you could go to the movies and he could recite total paragraphs or dialogue, and
Yeah.
you're like, how do you remember their names? How in the world do you remember what they said?
Yeah, and
and
he's
the
like, "How do you not?" It's just what he could
and he's
do.
like, Mom, you weren't paying attention. So it's funny how the conversations we had, I keep revisiting them.
Yes.
And
Yes.
very seldom has anything ever been negative. The talk of the afterlife, conversations around that, whether people believe in the afterlife. For instance,
Hmm.
I have a connection, and my connection to the afterlife is my son Anthony, and it's never been stronger
Yeah.
than with any other person. But I think too, when people are going through this, they're just looking for that hope. They're
Hmm.
looking for, you have it with, the children.
Right.
I have it through all the memories, and then my two children, his sisters, Lindsay and
Hmm.
Tara. So I have all of that. Their father died in 2008, and that was quite the challenge
Yeah.
relationship. And he was a very challenging father. He suffered from a lot of what Anthony had suffered from. So there was definitely something genetic going on there with
Hmm.
that. But sometimes I wrestle with the nature versus nurture, which is it?
Yeah.
Like narcissism.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was thinking about that as well. And it's I think when we allow ourselves to be open to the idea that our loved ones are always with us in spirit. And sometimes that shows up in different ways. I share with my mom and my brother, and we talk about the moment that my sister passed. All started seeing hummingbirds more
Oh,
frequently,
yeah.
and it's so funny. So I have a little container back here that, randomly has hummingbirds on there, but we would see one in our backyards. And yeah, as you know, I'm out here in Arizona and they're out in California. And so every time I see that hummingbird in the morning, I truly feel like it's just that moment for me to stop and acknowledge the relationship with my sister. And sometimes I have to verbally talk to that hummingbird out loud and say, okay, like I hear you, I see you, I'm gonna go do the
Okay, I
thing.
get it.
Yes. I get it. I get
We
it.
have
I get it.
cardinals. We have
Yes.
cardinals. Different bird,
Uh-huh.
but I can relate very much cardinals, and
Yes.
yeah, we've done that. But I think talking openly about death, I
Mhm.
think our society has so many ills, and we're going to be approaching them more and more and optimize her too. We have decided to take and do our guest speakers on the first and third Tuesdays of each month, and then take the second and the fourth Tuesdays to then delve a little bit more into the personal
The
side of
human
life,
side, yeah.
our social ills, support groups for you, how you can plan, or who you can work with to help you become better at what you do, whether it's a job or going through the grieving process. And I think professional and peer support options are really, really important. And before we close here, um, I really wanted to go into a couple of those, if that's good
Mhm.
with you.
Yeah,
And audience, if
absolutely.
you want to write these down or revisit these, this is just a few things, just some suggestions. But grief counselors and therapists, yeah, I understand that there's a big change in the therapy sessions that are going out there. And some of that we're going to be touching base with. Colleen Stubbs will be someone on a future OH2 that we're going to go into that, and what happens with certain counselors. But I think with counselors like your grief therapists, the ones who work it through art, that's another
Mhm.
creative way of
Yes.
going about it. But there's support groups like Grief Share, going to Grief Share and connect with others who share your loss, because maybe you don't have somebody close. Maybe you don't have a Barb and a Quincy that
Yeah.
you can talk to openly about this, and maybe weep a little. Weeping is not a sign of weakness. However, people who use it to extreme lengths, then I question
Mhm.
what the heck's going on there. But really, all of us are going to go through this grieving process differently, and not to
Absolutely.
feel shame for what you're doing either. I know my
Yeah.
son used to talk about shame, and maybe some people feel that when they're grieving and going through the process.
I think so too, because there's a certain level. I think when you don't respond as people anticipate how you should respond, then you feel as though you have to perform grief, right? And you have to perform that I'm sad because it makes other people more comfortable if I'm sad in this moment, rather than maybe my way of processing is something that looks and feels unfamiliar to them. So I think in that, being able to create space for the different way that people grieve, right? Because some of us will want to sort of throw ourselves into our work. And assuming these are healthy habits, right? Nothing that's sort of
Right.
self-destructive. But I think being a support system, a family or a friend, and just even if you don't know what to do in that moment, right? Just saying, hey, how can I support you? And that person may not know, but sometimes it's just that question that allows for them to think about how is it that they want to be supported, because oftentimes people are just forcing their support on them without knowing if that's how I really like to be supported. So I would say get a little clarity.
I'm sure there are people who, for instance, when a parent dies and that parent wasn't very kind to,
Hmm.
my father was not kind to his children. My mother told me she hated me uh,
Mm,
a couple of years before she started with dementia, um,
yeah.
and was into that. She had some issues herself from growing up. And I think some of the things when you look back, so then when they passed, when it was sister who was a drug addict and did not do good things to her body or her children, did not live a halfway decent life. When
Hmm.
that happened, then when brother died, who had his challenges in life, and then mom, because of the way she had treated me so many years, even though all three of them passed within 6 months, my sister, because of things that a process I went through after her, but after they all passed, I was just like kind of relieved because there was so much stuff with them. And then when my father had passed in 2001, which was 16 years prior to, and I asked him, I was his favorite growing up. I was his little
Hmm.
girl. That's probably why my mother started hating me at 5, 6 years old. But anyway, when he passed away, and I said to him, Dad, do you have any regrets in life? And he had taken off, left our family, went with another family that had children and all the
Oh
dynamics
wow.
we had, but he chose another family over us. And
Hmm.
I said to him, Dad, do you have any like regrets about your life or anything? He was like, nope, none. I lived my own
Mm.
life. And I just thought, each of my experiences with them, I'm one of eight in a family. I had
Oh
six
wow.
siblings. I was one of six siblings, mom and dad. And my brother, who was long term, there was alcoholism and drugs in my family,
Okay.
throughout my family, my immediate family. And when he passed away in December of 2024, a year plus after Anthony passed, it's almost like I was numb from all of them with all of this stuff. And I think sometimes people don't know how to feel when they don't feel like the love and they don't feel the compassion towards someone that they should be grieving.
Yeah.
And it can be very confusing and it may be difficult. And maybe some people do have to pretend that they are in the
Mhm.
grieving process. And hopefully they will get a little support on that end too. I never even considered that. But now that you mentioned that, looking back on those deaths, it definitely was odd. It was different.
Yeah. Yeah. Because oftentimes, like, we don't always know the true relationship, right? That someone may have been in with that person.
Right.
They may have the title of of that type of person in your life, right? The title of mother, the title of father, whatever that may be. But if we don't really act in relation to each other in that way, then sometimes what you've been bringing to me is maybe turmoil or agita. Every time I talk to you, I'm so much uncertainty that when I think about when people, pass away, there's a level of rest that we all get to have just a little bit, especially if someone was in turmoil, if they were living a lifestyle that maybe
Sickness.
if
Yeah.
whatever exactly that may be. So just
So
being able to
many
have that
things.
bit of rest a bit is also sometimes a part of that grieving process, and it just may look different.
Yeah, and we have to, I think, depend on our family and friends. I know I have some girls that have been in my life. My longest best friend Jeannie, and then Kim. The year after her, I met her, and then my girlfriend Stephanie. They became my family when I
Mhm.
was in my teens when Dad walked away. So when I then met with these things later, they filled that void. That family doesn't necessarily need to be or mean that it is biological family. You can
Oh,
have a
sure.
family of friends, people that are there to support you. You can be married to someone who is not
Yep,
about you and is all about them and
absolutely.
has no emotion, no empathy whatsoever. And when you're going through something, you don't have that support system in your own home. So finding family or friends or that peer support group Maybe it might be someone that you have a professional relationship with, and those
Hmm.
bonds grow and develop over time. But there are other people to help you, and just so that you can be heard, and someone will listen to you, because there are people out there who will listen to you.
Yeah, I do think that, we are probably underutilizing in an effective way, various support groups. I think about the many fabulous grief coaches I have in my network, and I'm so thankful for them, and to the ones who reached out when they heard sort of what my family was going through, just to share some
Yeah.
of their best practices. And I think um, whatever way you can create the community who will allow for you to be expressive in the way that feels honest and true for you, you need to seek
Mm,
those people out.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's why it's
What a
so.
what a conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, death in the grieving process. That's what we're talking about here on Optimize Her Too YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us, Quincy.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure to have you join me here and have these conversations on Tuesday evenings.
I'm loving
And
the diversity that we're bringing to the show, and
mm,
just I think the human side of it. Yes, we are women in business and we want to grow our business, and all that's great, but we are also women who have experienced a lot, right? And I think to not bring that part of us to our conversations is a disservice to ourselves and our audience. So I urge you guys to continue to listen as Barb and I continue to share some of the experiences that have gotten us to where we are today
it's
and
how we
fuel us for where we're
grow.
going tomorrow. Yeah.
Educate, elevate, empower. That is the
Name of the
substance
game.
of Optimize Her Too right here on YouTube. We'll see you next week, next Tuesday. That will be August 18th at 7 p.m. Thank you so very much, Quincy. Thank you so much for being open, for sharing. I say honesty is the best policy. Sometimes we have to have that delayed honesty about our true feelings, because it takes
Hmm.
time to go through those stages, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And as you all listen to this, and if you can think about someone in your life who maybe they just need some support, maybe this is the first way of opening up that conversation with them. But we'll also make sure all of the resources that we talked about are listed in the description box below.
And upbeat here is, as you listen to us, please like, share, follow. Please, please tell others about the amazing things that we're doing together here on Optimize Her Too. Quincy and I look forward to the pleasure of your company. Thank you so very, very much, and stay well.